Dr. Randy Sharma.
All right. Feel that.
All right, thank you. So, you're going to wonder, when Chris asked me to speak here today, I was like, and he said the topic of inclusive, I was like, why me? Why am I speaking on this? And he said, because the way you practice is inclusive. And I thought, and it really made me think about what that meant and how we do that. Like David said, I'm Randy Sharma. I am a family practice doctor. I have an office over at Nationwide in Plaza 3. And I've been in Columbus for about 15 years. And I'm terrible at making PowerPoint presentations. So there's nothing sexy about this at all. So I was up till 2:30 just because I just don't do these things well. How many people have been in Columbus for, let's say, like 5 years or less? You. What have you noticed has changed in that 5 years?
Oh, I haven't been here 5 years yet.
That's okay. Has it been more than like 2?
It'll be 2 this year.
Okay. Have you noticed anything that's changed in that 2 years?
Not really.
No? Okay. Never mind. You are excluded. You are not included. Yeah.
I would say it's more diverse.
It's more diverse. Definitely. I would say it's definitely more diverse. Diverse in what ways? Okay. People from different backgrounds. Restaurants, sure. That's a good one. What about in 10 years? Anybody that's been here close to 10 years? And what have you noticed has changed?
More developed, not necessarily in a good way. Some in good ways, some bad ways.
Right. It's definitely more developed where there's a ton of construction. I've lived in the short north for a dozen years, and it seems like every week I'm walking around going, I don't even know what was there 6 months ago. And that's part of change too. And what about 20 years, Mr. Timothy Wolfstar? What have you noticed? Like, how's the city changed in the last 20 years?
The city has embraced the culture that we now know. It was much more of a college town, and now it's becoming a cultural mecca.
Okay, good. It's kind of what I was kind of getting at. There's a lot. This is 100 years ago, and it's kind of fun looking at this because it gives a breakdown of 100 years ago where the different ethnicities were, and it's little jurisdictions. These little areas right here are like quote scattered Negro families. It was just Columbus was white, and everything in the breakdown is actually European. So yeah, Columbus is evolving, and in some ways, if we've been here for a while, it might not seem so great. In other ways, it is pretty amazing, and a lot of that is because of the cultures that we're bringing in, a lot of the development. And we're seeing a lot more art. It's a lot more vibrant. If we start looking now, this is just the youth population, people under 24. This isn't just white. The red areas are more black youth. The white areas are white people, or the blue areas are white people. Little Asian pocket here, but the thing that I wish I could find, I didn't find it, was a little bit more of the breakdown of the actual ethnicities. Because we know we have pockets. People are going to stay with their community because that's where they're comfortable, that's where they're going to be able to be taken care of and have people that are going to help them around the city, right? So you have pockets that are going to be Somali, and now we've got pockets that are Nepalese, and there's pockets of Indian people and Asian people. So one of the things that we need to figure out is we don't just want these pockets. People are going to stick in their groups, so we can't expect that we're going to have smatterings of all the different colors all over the city, but we want to make sure that we're including people, that we're not just we want to prevent segregation, but we also want to make sure that we've all integrated and that we're inclusive. Inclusivity. You have to have your token, your slide with the definition. As we know, it's the practice or policy of including people who might otherwise be excluded, marginalized, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members of minority groups. And every one of those groups has something to bring, and we can all share together. And I think one of the things I really thought that I started to realize as I was going through this was a lot of this is reciprocity and kind of looking at each other and giving and taking from each other. Now, I was born in Ohio. My parents are immigrants. My dad moved here in 1970. We grew up in Springboro, a little tiny town right here. And it has grown a lot, but when my parents moved there, it was a little farm town. It was an area where people either worked at GM, and that was, you know, they were going to stay there forever because they were going to get their kids' jobs there, and they paid very well, or they were farmers. And so they're handing down their farms from generation to generation, and not surprisingly, there was no diversity. I think I ended up graduating with about 150 people, and everybody stayed there. I mean, for the most part, unless people were Air Force brats, everybody was still there pretty much from, like my best friends from 2nd grade and 3rd grade, we graduated together and we were still best friends. But there wasn't a lot of diversity. I think when I was in school, it was me, my brother, there was one other Indian family with 2 kids, and 1 black kid. So in a school of probably 500 people, you had 5 people of color total. So I'm not going to say I had a bad childhood. I had a great childhood. My friends were great. Their parents were great. We are, you know, slumber parties, sports, all that good stuff. But we were still different, and it was pretty obvious, you know, between, you know, my parents dressed differently than their families. Our food was weird, and you know, it was like, what is up with those accents? I can't understand those people. So that was, we knew we were different, but, and this is kind of where I'd say a little bit of the difference between integration and inclusivity. If my friends spent the night for, you know, if we had a slumber party or whatever, my parents would order pizza because, well, they knew that people just weren't going to eat our food, right? I don't think it really hit me until I was in high school. And I think one of the things we've seen, or at least been reminded of in the last few years, is you can sit there and think that everybody's on the same page and everybody's, you know, it's one big loving environment. And like we saw a couple years ago with the Trump campaign, it doesn't take a whole lot to stir up all that ugliness in people. So when I was a freshman in high school, I mean, being a freshman in high school is hard enough as it is. You're awkward, you got acne, hormones are raging, and you got older people that are just going to be, you're scared to beat the crap out of you anyways. So one day, I was walking back between classes, going back to my locker, and I just froze. And I took a big gulp. And my heart was in my stomach. Spray painted on my locker was a racial, it still bothers me, was a racial slur, and I thought, oh crap, there's nobody to turn to. My friends did not understand what that felt like. I can't say anything to anybody. What are you gonna do, telling somebody? And I knew who did it. It was a group of guys who had just around the same time, we had one Jewish teacher, they had gone and smashed out the windows of his car. So if you're telling somebody, you're gonna get the shit kicked out of you. And the weird thing is when something like this happens, not only are you scared, you're also embarrassed, which is a really weird thing. The vice principal called me to his office and he said, sat me down, I heard about your locker. I heard about your locker. You know, I don't even understand. I thought he was gonna say something wise and comforting. And he goes, your family's from India. They don't even have sand there. And he was trying to, that was his way of trying to comfort me. Actually, if he did any research, we actually do have sand there. So, you know, how many people here have been in a situation like that where they felt like an outsider? Okay. Being an outsider is not, from the outside looking in, it can be the people that are quote unquote normal, it can be intimidating trying to deal with them, trying to even just approach them or ask them for help. And so we can tend to keep things hidden, you know, whether it's the food that we eat, the different aspects of our culture, or who we love and how we love. And so when Chris asked me to talk about inclusivity, I thought about work, because you would think that, I'm a doctor, I'm a family practice doctor, I deal with a wide range of people, that I would have to be inclusive. And so I was thinking about how do we use that and how do we relate that to the real world. One of the first things, a couple that I want to hit on. I would say be approachable, communicate well, be curious and educate yourself, hold your judgment, and invite others to share your experiences. One of the things that people, I think, being approachable, and like I was saying before, can be intimidating when you're the, quote, outsider. If you go to the doctor, nobody likes going to the doctor. You go to the doctor the first time, most people get a little panicky. How do you make it comfortable? Because that changes the entire experience. One of the things that we did at work is we have people the first time they come in fill out this. They call it the SOGI form. It's the sexual orientation and gender identity form. We didn't used to do this, and one of the reasons this is important is especially with the addition of the gender identity and the sexual orientation tabs, and they've actually put things on there that you would not normally see on a normal, or that you would expect to see unless you actually cared. Even with sexual orientation, it's lesbian, gay, straight, bisexual, something else, don't know, and then choose not to disclose. Of course, people are allowed to keep things private if they want to. The reason that I think that makes us more approachable is that it's a silent nod that it's okay, you are who you are, and we want to know that we actually do care about that, and so that might make people be a little bit more open. And I think being the same way out in the community, if you're around people that are of a different background, it can be really easy to not make eye contact or not engage with them, and so it's important that we at least try to let down our guard as well, so that we are more approachable. Another thing is communicate well. Of course, if you can't communicate, you're not going to be able to share information accurately and appropriately. For one of the things that I learned early on is, as much as if I have a patient that is, an immigrant, they might, I might not be able to understand them, but at the same time, they can't understand me. So even if I'm giving the information and I think I'm giving it in a useful way, it might not make any sense to them either. Just as frustrated as I could be with them, they are with us. Out in the community, it's a little bit different. We use interpreters, and I used to be fine with people just having their family members come in, but then it was one of those things where if we were to use a family member as an interpreter, you might not get the whole story. Somebody might be, leaving details out, or the person that is the patient might not want to disclose some things because they don't want their family member to know that. So we use interpreters now because that way we can get the information back and forth. And if they have a question, they can ask, and I can relay that information back to them in a language that they understand, or in a way that they understand. Be curious and educate yourself. I like this one. We've all heard the quote, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I think one of the ways that we can really do a good job of making people feel, being more inclusive, is actually asking questions. Because when we ask questions, people are gonna, there's a whole big, there's a big dam and there's a big wall of water back there. And if you can open that up, you're going to learn so much more about people and so much more about their cultures, and they're going to be more open to sharing those things with you. And so when you do that, you're also going to educate yourself. You're going to get a lot more out of them. If you see somebody that dresses differently, or growing up, if people would just ask my mom, why are you wearing that thing on that dot on your head? Why do you have that bindi? You might get a lot more information out of them, and then she might be open to disclosing more. One of the other things is food. Food's a really, really big one because people put so much love into food, and it's such a cultural thing. Like I had said before, my friends growing up, they did not eat my mom's food. My mom is one hell of a cook. Some of these people here have had my mom's food. She's amazing. It was kind of fascinating to watch. After I graduated high school, one of my friends who was, I don't want to say weird, but he was just a little bit more out there. But he would come over and, there was food there. He'd be, what's that? And then he would eat it. And then he loved it. And I'll tell you what, every time my mom knew he was coming over, she was down in the kitchen. She loved it. She was in the kitchen making him exactly what he wanted because she wanted to share that. And she really appreciated the fact that he cared. He cared enough to try and experience that. Now in Columbus, we're becoming a very diverse city. We've got amazing resources and companies like Columbus Food Adventures. They do an entire ethnic food tour. And they're going to restaurants that are Somali and Ethiopian and Mexican and Indian and Nepalese. I mean, go immerse yourself in that, because when you do that, you're going to learn about the culture, you're going to learn about the people, and especially with just watching Anthony Bourdain, what better way to have a conversation with somebody about who they are and where they come from, other than over a plate of their home food. Hold your judgment. This is an interesting story. It is really easy to judge people that are different. And it's really easy to sit there and think that we're right. And I think we see this, we're becoming, right now, our country's so polarized. A few months ago, I was at work, and this patient came in, and he was from like southeastern Ohio, and he'd been in a terrible accident. He was hit by a car, and he had his leg amputated. His girlfriend was with him, and she was really, really fidgety. And at one point, he actually asked her, like, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm going to go to the waiting room." It was really weird. So I'm taking care of him, and I happen to look down at his stump. And people will put these little sleeves on their stumps to protect the skin there. And I kind of stopped for a minute because it had a big Confederate flag on it, and it just made me super uncomfortable. And I kind of just walked out of the room for a minute. I excused myself, because I really wondered. I was like, what the hell's going on here? We have, there were 6 doctors in the practice. 4 of them, I think, are white. Why are you seeing me? You don't care about me. You probably think, I'm inferior to you. And so I went out and I talked to my medical assistant, who was African American, and she just kind of said, yeah, that really bothered me too. Now, I could have the option of just telling the patient, that I'm not comfortable taking care of him, and that it might make more sense for him to see another doctor, or for him to go to another practice. And I really thought about it. And then I said no. Because that's a moment, that's a teachable moment. That's a chance for us to talk about that he, and I think a lot of people don't relate Confederate flag to racism and hatred and, oppression. If I had done that, if I said, I'm not going to see you anymore, is that any different than a baker saying they don't want to bake a cake for a gay couple? I don't know. But you can have that conversation, and I can say, I just want you to know this makes me uncomfortable, and here's why. He doesn't have to do anything about it. It might make him think. It might be something where he's like, you're overreacting. Or it might make a difference. It might make him say, you know what, maybe I should be a little bit more careful. Maybe I should rethink what that means, right? So I think it's important that we do hold our judgment, especially when it's something like that really does bother us. At least think about it before we just have a knee-jerk reaction. Invite others to share your experiences. If somebody's from a different background, they might not. It could mean the world to them to invite them to play to a softball game or to whatever team you're doing, or to some other event that you're comfortable with. This was kind of fun last summer. I got to take young Chris to Christopher Scott there to his first rock concert, and it was Chris is into production and stuff, and happened to be a band that I worked with, and so he got to hang out with the tech guys and work and learn about how in-ear monitors work. But it was a really fun experience just to see that his perspective and see how intriguing it was to him and how exciting it was for him, and in turn it made it even more fun for me too. Couple bonus things that don't have to do so much with as much with like racial or ethnic lines, but just more about professional lines. Some things that I've done that have been kind of fun and interesting. Inclusivity also, I think, involves professional areas as well. Like David had mentioned, several years ago, I had a patient that was HIV positive. He actually had full-blown AIDS, and he didn't have insurance. And at that time, if you made more than $39,000, you could not qualify for Medicaid. So he could not afford, if he didn't have insurance, his job didn't provide it, he couldn't afford to pay for he couldn't pay for office visits. He could have, but the lab work is terribly expensive, and his meds were astronomically expensive. And then he got really, really sick, and he ended up in the hospital. And it was one of those things where I was like, this is ridiculous. Why is this happening? What can we do about it? And so the only person that I knew in the community to even reach out to would be was Nina West. Because I knew of Nina, I didn't really know Nina, and said, hey, I have this is going on. Is there any way we can work together? And so we sat down, we talked, and we said, okay, well, great, we can try to do something, but what do we do? And that's around the time, not too long before that, Wolfstar had introduced me to Steve Weaver, who was opening this store called the Candle Lab. And so we thought, well, why don't we incorporate, we're really trying to work on local issues, why don't we invite local business people to work with us? You know, they can promote their product as well. And that's where, and so we came up with Project Zero, and we started with the candles, and then we did a soap with Megan Green from Stinky Bomb Soaps, and then there was a coffee sleeve made by Amy D. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing to be able to include people and businesses that have nothing to do with yours, that maybe want to give back but don't quite know how to do it, giving them that outlet. Another thing I did was, when I opened my new office a few months ago, I think art is very important for therapy. I think it can be very healing. I'm a big fan of Stephanie Rond, who's a local artist, and there was a story that I had shared, and so she had this gallery show, and she happened to have made this piece, and she explained to me that she's like, this was kind of inspired by that. And when I opened the office, I had a whole bunch of art, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. And they already had all this art hung up and stuck on the walls, and you couldn't get it off. And it's so generic and it's so corny, and I hate it. But I fought for this. There's two pictures, and I fought to have them up there because I think it's important that we do include people from fields outside of ours to whatever craft we do, if we can. The other one, just another day at the office. This was kind of what Dave was talking about as well. Treat people like people. This is Angus Young from AC/DC. People are just people. It's funny because I keep getting these calls from Live Nation and from Promo West, and there was a comment once where the lady who worked at Live Nation was like, we love when you can come out because you know how to talk to these artists and their crew. And I just didn't think about it, but it's because I'm not gonna say I don't care. I'm a huge music fan, but they're just people. When Angus was sick, I went to his hotel, knock on the door, and I'm like expecting somebody else to open the door, and he's really short. And that's pretty funny considering that I'm short. He is a lot shorter than me. And he opened the door, it's like, oh, he's just a guy. So just whenever you meet people, even if it's somebody that, is a celebrity or you feel like you should be intimidated by, even if it's somebody who's like the CEO at wherever you work, they're just people. Treat them like people, because if they expect you to treat, if they expect you to treat them any differently, then that's on them. I mean, that's probably not anybody that you necessarily want to work with or collaborate with anyways. I don't know. Oh, we survived. We're done. So that's all I got. Are there any questions?
Get here. You must have questions. Yes.
I was curious.
No, use this.
No.
I was curious if you did have a conversation with the guy with the Confederate flag covered on his seat.
Yeah, I want to know about that too.
I think I did tell him that it made me uncomfortable. I did not tell him that I would consider not seeing him as a patient. I don't think that's fair. But it was just one of those things where it's like, just so you know, that makes me uncomfortable. And you know, and just to say that, just to at least put that out there. Interestingly, thinking back on it, I don't think I've seen him since then. So I mean, and that's on him too. You know, but the thing that was interesting about it was, again, his. And maybe it's just reading into the fact that his girlfriend was with him, and she was really uncomfortable. I mean, sweating, fidgety, and he even looked at her like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, I'm gonna go to the waiting room." Like, so I don't know, but he hasn't come back since. Other questions?
Hi, so I loved hearing about your personal experiences and how you've approached a lot of these problems. So say you work in a building with a lot of other people, and if they don't buy into your philosophy, or if they kind of do but don't really see the barriers that other people might have, or they just might not view the world the same way, how do you address the people that you're working with to make it an entirely more inclusive environment?
That is a good question. I work with 3 people, I think. So no, I'm kidding. I think, you know, I don't know if there's an easy way to do it. In a big environment, you know, and that's why a lot of big companies have these, you know, people that just do diversity and work on that. For me personally, it's just leading by example, and there are times where I might not be on point, but then I can always go back and backtrack and explain that I was wrong, that I shouldn't have behaved in the way I did or said what I said. But I think a lot of that is just kind of leading by example, and then also bringing in some different cultures or talking about those, you know, experiences, or sometimes patients have really amazing stories, and so with my staff, they're not going to be in the exam room, but I'll share some of those things or some things I learned about a culture, just because then they can have that conversation, because that can also start a conversation that my staff can have with people if they know about this person has this background, or they did this, or did you know that Somali people do this, or whatever, and so that's in a really small environment, you know. But I think it's just, even if you can bring in some little pointers or some just little nuggets of information that might pique their curiosity too, and get them to engage in those conversations.
How different is it to treat people in their environment, like their hotel room or their home, versus in the office?
I love that question.
It's a little different. You know, you don't have as many resources. They're just different things that make it a little bit odd.
Stories.
Man. Well, one of them is that
Angus Young, right?
no. There are usually other people around, and you know, so it's in one way it's kind of easier because they're probably more comfortable, and if they're having you come out, they actually want you there, right? So they're almost happy to see you. But there are always other people around. And the reason I started laughing was a few months ago there was. Do you guys know anybody know who Tenacious D is? Jack Black, his band. His guitarist was opening as well. Like the guitarist was blowing double duty, and his voice was shot. And he was like, they were seeing if I could come out and give him a shot of steroids because that can help sometimes. And so I did, and I'm sitting there, and there's 2 dressing rooms, and the doors were open, and you know, if I was gonna give him a shot in his butt, or wherever, we're gonna close the door. But in the meantime, the door's open because people are coming in and out. And so I'm sitting there and I'm drawing up, the syringe with the steroid, and this guy pops his head in the door, and and I didn't even think about it because in my mind I'm working, and I was actually wearing like probably something like this, and this guy sticks his head in the door, and it's a Columbus City cop, and they're having this big conversation and whatever else, and I thought like maybe it's one of his high school friends, like, I was in the neighborhood and I knew you guys were playing, so I stopped in. It was his cousin, and I didn't think anything of it, and as soon as the cop left, this guy just started cracking up. He's like, man, I can't wait for what my parents hear about this. And I was like, what? He goes, well, you're sitting back there like drawing up the syringe of, he doesn't. And I was like, I didn't even think about the fact that I was not in a white coat and had a stethoscope on. So it can actually be pretty amusing.
I didn't think doctors made house calls any longer.
Only the good ones.
Hello. So I'm actually, all my family's from Springboro, so it hit home for me a little bit, and I feel like oftentimes I'm talking to a little bit of a brick wall. The conversation here in Columbus around inclusivity is really interesting, and I feel like an open dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have those conversations back in southwestern Ohio or in a community that may not be as open to an inclusive conversation?
Yeah, my parents still live there. My parents still live there. Yeah, I mean, it's different now. Like, Springboro has changed a lot. When I grew up there, I think I graduated with 150 people. There were 2 traffic lights in town when we first moved there. And now it's a completely different place. I mean, I think the graduating classes are 500 and 600. There's a lot more diversity. And it was a different time, right? So it was a different time. We didn't have the internet. There really wasn't diversity on TV. I mean, you had the Cosby Show, but it was black and white. I mean, I think it's at least try to invite people to your table, and I like using that literally and figuratively. And trying to get them to experience your culture, and letting your guard down, because sometimes that's hard too, is letting your guard down to let people in, because there's a good chance they're going to judge. And my parents were always good about that. It was never a thing where they were like, hiding food or not. I mean, my mom was still eating what she was eating. My family's still eating what they're eating. It's just, you'd also order a pizza just because you knew people weren't going to try it probably. So in a smaller community, I think things are a little bit different because you do have the internet, and I think I think we see enough on TV now, there's enough diversity. I think people are more open to those differences. But even 25 years ago was way different.
I really appreciate what you said about food, about the importance and that the role food can play in
Sure.
sort of breaking these down. Do you at all worry about appropriation? So like Cinco de Mayo, there I'm understanding Mexican culture, but really not. Or superficiality, right? So I went to an Indian restaurant, therefore I get you now.
Right.
Is that a concern to you?
You know what? Right now, no. Because at least people are experiencing it, right? So I don't think it's I mean, you see things where people are putting their own spin on Indian dishes and Indian foods, and especially like in England, if over there, Indian food is very much part of the culture, and it's part of the mainstream culture. But at least people are experiencing it, rather than going, no, gross, like what is that? I mean, just because they're just not used to seeing it. So no, I'm not right now, and I don't think so. I mean, you're seeing things that people are pulling in, like the when you see the color runs, these races where like the 5Ks, 10Ks, where people were all throwing all the dye and stuff. I mean, that's based on an Indian holiday called Holi. So, and that I think that's okay, at least because that's also a moment that's also a teachable moment where you can say, do you know where this comes from? It's actually a celebration in India where they're celebrating, the death of this evil woman, and then so that's where that comes from. And so you can always take that back. But right now, at least with Indian culture, I think we're far away from anything being, from that type of appropriation.
So, well, and again, I love the way you think about that and talk about curiosity. Just what curiosity can do. I'm interested in you as a person. I'm interested in where you come from. I'm interested in what you're eating tonight or what your mother's eating. I think that's wonderfully generous.
But again, it goes back to when you do ask those questions, you have those questions. When you ask somebody about their culture, their background, what they do, or just about them as a person, it lets them know that you're interested in them, right? And then they're going to open up and say, hey, and then you're going to get to that next layer, and you're going to get to that next layer. Even at work, if, somebody has there are plenty of times where people have jobs where I'm like, ooh, that sounds really challenging. Can you tell me about that? Or something might be going on and it's become it's a topic that I'm interested in. What's going on here? How do you deal with that? How can I help? Or whatever you do, if you engage with people on a real level, they're going to open up more, and you're going to get more out of it too. And then you're going to learn more because you're going to get more information out of them.
So, as I said, that requires you to be incredibly generous, and I appreciate your generosity here this morning.
Well, thank you.
For teaching us about the importance of generosity.
Well, thank you.
Randy Sharma.
Thank you. I got it. All right. I survived.
We meet again next month.